Hello, my friends. My name is Ryan Freeman. Welcome to another book review. Today I have Charles Dickens' The Adventures of Oliver Twist, published in 1837. This novel has been very popular throughout the Victorian era, where Dickens was a celebrated, perhaps the greatest British literary celebrity of his time, even with young Queen Victoria staying up late at night reading this very novel, which I will be speaking about. I will not be spoiling the story. I will talk about it, my thoughts and impressions, why I decided to read it, why I put off reading it for so long, and why I was glad I finally got around to it. Charles Dickens, as you know, has many other classic works. One of his most popular is A Christmas Carol, which greatly influenced the way that we celebrate Christmas in both England and America, as well as A Tale of Two Cities, David Copperfield, Great Expectations, as well as many other classics. This is the first Charles Dickens novel that I have read. I have watched A Christmas Carol many times growing up as a boy in America, as almost probably every kid watches that at Christmas time. But this was the first novel of his that I read. It has been sitting on my bookshelf for years. I picked it up at a used book sale for $1. And this particular version is hardback and has a very nice binding. It also has beautiful illustrations. I will put some of the illustrations up on the screen for you guys, perhaps as I talk about the novel. And so for just $1, I got this in excellent condition, but I sat it on my shelf for a long time and didn't get around to reading it, simply because I didn't take it seriously. I thought Dickens was, he's one of the classics, but I thought, it was for children or it wasn't serious reading. And so I have been very busy reading, some of the more heavy hitters. But that being said, I am very happy I picked up The Adventures of Oliver Twist. From the very first chapter, I was entranced, and not only by the charming characters, which Dickens is very well known for his caricatures, his characters being very memorable, not only their names, such as the name Oliver Twist. We all remember that name, whether or not we've heard it, whether or not we've read the novel before, we all remember it. Other characters in this novel, such as the Artful Dodger, Fagin, the Jew, Sikes, and in many of his other novels, such as David Copperfield and Ebenezer Scrooge, his characters are very archetypal, very vivid, very just fun too, very fun. Whether or not they're villains or heroes. One thing I will say about The Adventures of Oliver Twist, this is a novel full of heroes and villains and victims. When I read Game of Thrones, just to compare it, one of the things I remembered about Game of Thrones was a lot of the characters were very gray. Even the villains were good in many ways, and even the good guys were bad in many ways. In Oliver Twist, some of the heroes are just heroes. They're nothing but virtuous. They don't have a lot of bad points to themselves. And some of the villains are truly villainous, although I will say that even the most dastardly villains in this novel, The Adventures of Oliver Twist, such as Fagin, the Jew, and I'm going to get to him in just a moment, as well as Bill Sikes, the murderer, the housebreaker, I always liked reading their chapters, even though they were dastardly, as I said, and not great role models for young Oliver. They were very captivating and very fun to read. I think that's true of any great villains, such as Darth Vader in the Star Wars movies, or any classic that has villains. Villains are sometimes our favorite characters. Going back to Fagin the Jew, he's one of the first arch villains that Oliver Twist runs into, and he's referred to as the Jew in the first part of the novel, and then just as Fagin going towards the end. And I read that's because some people complain that Charles Dickens was sort of being a little anti-Semitic, and he wrote Oliver Twist in serial manner, so it would come out the chapter by chapter or portion by portion through a publication, and it wasn't collated into an actual. Actually, it was collated into a 3-volume novel, but it wasn't finished in one go, and it wasn't released to the public in one go. So he had chances to listen to the public's reaction and modify his style and the story accordingly, which is very interesting. So one of the criticisms that you'll get about Oliver Twist is that, it might be a little anti-Semitic because this character, Fagin the Jew, who is this greedy, long-nosed, avaricious, manipulator, he's referred to as the Jew. Well, all I can say is I probably wouldn't look favorably at it if I was Jewish, but I loved his character. He was one of the most interesting characters in the darn novel, So guys, loosen up. I'm not condoning anti-Semitism at all, but Fagin was one of the stars, in my opinion. It's a story of ups and downs, the tragedies of life, as well as being rescued from tragedy, all as we go through young Oliver Twist's life from when he's born. And let's just say he has a very rocky beginning. You know what? I think I picked up Oliver Twist, not to get personal, but I was kind of having a hard week and I wanted something light. And I remember reading through this novel, and I was just thinking how hard Oliver Twist's life was. And I kept thinking to myself, when I was thinking of my own personal problems, I thought, Ryan, you have nothing to complain of. If young Oliver Twist could keep going in life, Ryan, you can keep going in life. So it's one of the great reasons I do read is, the more I learn about possible ways of other humans living, then it gives more light to reflect on my own life. And a lot of Dickens' characters were based off of people in his real life. The beautiful Mary in this novel, who I don't want to spoil it. She's basically the young flower, virtuous. Everyone's in love with her for a good reason. She was based on Dickens' sister-in-law who lived with him and had a very deep impact on his life. So I don't really want to spoil the story. There's a lot of humor. I'd like to talk a little bit about his style. It's a story about this kid who grows up and finds friends and foes. There's mystery about his fate and his past. There are some scary moments. Now, from our modern sensibilities, I will say this is extremely tame. Even though there are some harsh things that are happening, including, abuse towards children and neglect that is very sad. It's not so explicit in comparison to our modern entertainment. I would often spend a couple hours reading this around sunset, and then I would come inside and watch a movie, and I would just be shocked at just the difference between past entertainment and modern entertainment. But what I was going to say is that out of all of Dickens' novels, I think Oliver Twist perhaps is the darkest. I haven't read his other novels, so the only reason that I can say that is that in the foreword, in the introduction, which I always recommend you read at the conclusion of the novel, because sometimes in the introductions and the forewords, they spoil the story. The editor wrote that Dickens, towards the end of his life, went on public reading tours, made a lot of money doing that. He was, like I said, one of the greatest literary celebrities of the Victorian era, perhaps the greatest celebrity in England. of his day. He would go on reading tours around the country. He was known internationally, and Dickens had a passion for the theater. He had actually was an amateur actor, and before he became a novelist, he even auditioned for some parts. And I believe he put on some theatrical productions, and maybe even ran away with an 18-year-old girl when he was in his middle 40s. Had not a very successful marriage during that time. Very rancorous marriage is what I read. But such is life, and the life of artists are often that way. What I was going to say is, why is Oliver Twist considered perhaps one of Dickens' darkest novels, or most or scariest novels, or most shocking novels? Is that during these reading tours, and this was towards the end of Dickens' life, and Dickens would have someone take his pulse before each reading and after each reading. And I guess whenever he would read passages from Oliver Twist, his heart rate would skyrocket compared to when he would read passages from his other novels. There's a lot of darkness in this novel, a lot of beauty, a lot of humor, but a lot of darkness. And so the humor, Dickens' humor was very witty, very sarcastic, and it was a delight and a surprise. Even describing some of these dark characters and some of these dastardly deeds and some of these tragedies, there was always humor right around the corner in another sentence or another paragraph that was remarkable, and I really enjoyed it. And I thought I wouldn't be able to appreciate Charles Dickens' humor in The Adventures of Oliver Twist if I had read it as a child. So I'm actually glad I read it now as an adult. It is beautiful, charming. I like the Victorian setting in England, the descriptions of the bridges and the clothes, although that's not too much to get around. It's mostly about the characters, virtues, vices, a very moral tale, and a beautiful one that I highly recommend. So if anything that I said sounds intriguing, I recommend picking up The Adventures of Oliver Twist. If you can get one with illustrations, it's really fun to turn the page and see this beautiful color reproduction of one of the characters. Dickens did work with some of the most famous and well-known illustrators of his era when making his novels. So that's it for now. I plan to pick up other classics from Dickens, and I hope that you enjoyed this review. If you have any questions or comments, as always, please put it down below. My name is Ryan Freeman. Thank you for watching. Bye.